Hey there, welcome to my new YouTube series focused on taking a deep dive into a photo that I've captured and showing you guys my mindset and how I approach and edit. Now, this right here is a church that I photographed in Saskatchewan, Canada on a recent trip. It's freezing cold, and I was road tripping 6 to 8 hours a day trying to find these beautiful abandoned buildings. Now, when I set out on this trip, I had no idea that there were these beautiful churches. And when I got to them, of course, my mind was blown. And yeah, so I'm going to walk you through how I took this image from here all the way to what you've seen on my Instagram, which is a wonderful black and white photo. Now, I always start the edit in Lightroom Classic. I import it, and then the first thing I do is I go over here on the right and I look at the color profile. Now, your images will automatically come in and be under the Adobe color profile. If you see me click here, it'll change the look of the image a little bit. Because I shoot on a Fujifilm GFX 102, the film simulations on that camera actually are emulated by Lightroom Classic. So you can see if I hover here, all these crazy changes happening. Now, I wanted this to be a black and white image with exceptional contrast. So I chose the Acros red filtered film simulation. On the left here is the history of my edits. So I'll just click through these and explain what each one is doing. So as I said, the Acros red filter is applied. The next thing I did is I went in and I looked at, you know, how the crop was on the image. Was I exactly centered? Was I not? So you can kind of see me playing around with the crop tool here. I finally settled on this composition. Now, there was something in the left-hand side here kind of bothering me that I wanted to get rid of as well, and that's what that is doing. You see this little strip of land down there. So I just got rid of that and centered it. The next thing I did is I came in and I played with the detail sliders. Now, in here, what you want to do is you want to mask the sharpening to be on your subject. So if you hold Alt Option on the Mac, you can get this kind of like pencil sketch look. Now, the white areas are where the sharpening will be applied, and the black areas will not have sharpening applied. So I dragged it into something about there. You'll see that take place. And then the other thing I did was change the radius and detail. For landscape photography, I bring radius all the way down, I bring detail all the way up. That just kind of brings out the sharpest image possible. As far as contrast, I will start with the contrast slider in the basic panel. Here I added 30 to the contrast. You can see it kind of darkens the cathedral, but doesn't really create the drama I'm looking for. So the next thing I went ahead and did is I went to the tone curve and I messed with this a bit. Now, the histogram is your most reliable tool when editing your photos. This histogram is all the information you'll need, and I edit visually just by looking at that in most cases when I'm messing with anything that has to do with the light in my image. So here is a tone curve, and for those not familiar with how this works, if I drag it here and you look at my histogram, you can see how it's kind of stretching out the right-hand side there. Now this is controlling my highlights. If I bring it all the way over, of course, it'll go white. Hurts your eyes, right? Now, the opposite is true over here. If I bring this in, these are the shadows. If I bring it all the way in, we can make the image go black. So, what you want to do is bring it in until it's clipping, and then bring it out a little. Bring it in until it's clipping. Bring it out a little. That makes sure that you are getting the most contrast possible in your image. Meaning, I'm not contrast here, of course, that's very contrasty. What I'm trying to do, and maybe I misspoke for a second there, is I'm really just trying to make sure that it's as bright as it can be and as dark as it can be without losing any information. And that's all I'm doing with the tonal adjustments there. So I'll go back to here and I will apply those tonal adjustments. Now you can see my histogram is stretched to edge. I then went through kind of a process of messing around with Lightroom Classic's masking that it has here in the circle on the right here. It can automatically select the sky, and I'll show you what it tried to do. When I said add the sky, it created this mask for me. Now, this isn't the worst, but it kind of is blending into the cathedral there. It's blending into the foreground a little bit because the tonality of the sky and the foreground are so similar. It's really struggling to distinguish where the sky begins and ends, right? So I went through all these steps, as you can see here on the left, trying to mess with different stuff. This is ultimately what I want, but I decided that I could do a better job of it on my own over in Photoshop. So ultimately, I exported it just looking like this. Now, when I export, I want to keep all of my edits, and what that means is I will export it as a smart object. So if you right click and you go edit in, open a smart object in Photoshop, it'll bring it into Photoshop looking like this. Now this is the final image. I will unclick my layers here. And you'll see this is what came over from Lightroom Classic. Now the smart object down here in the bottom right, if I double click this, these are all the edits that I made over in Lightroom, now brought over into Photoshop. So this is the raw image data. Anything that I maybe made a mistake on or I want to change from the original image, I can do here. It saves all the edits that I just did. So I'm going to cancel out of this and dismiss. Yes. Now, first step. I want the sky to be textured, dark, moody, really bring this image to life. So I made a folder here, and the mask on that folder, it looks like this. Now, it's more or less the exact same as what Lightroom Classic did, maybe a little bit better, but as you can see, and something to understand in Photoshop is white reveals and black conceals. So, Cathedral's not being affected, foreground kind of being affected, not really. Edges here are kind of being selected. But for the large portion of the church, it's being unaffected by my edits. Now, I'll click out of here and go step by step through these curves adjustments I made. Step one, extreme adjustment, right? We want to make that sky as dark as possible. So I just dragged the corner in and darkened that right up. Next thing I did is I tweaked it a little further. I did another curves adjustment here, brought the highlights up a little, brought the shadows down a little, just give it that little extra punch in the image. Next step, I went ahead and burned a little bit of an area. Now, this is such a subtle change that I honestly can't even see it, so we'll skip over that. There's some dust up here in the corner that was driving me crazy, so I cloned that out. Voila. This is on a blank layer here for healing and cloning. This means that it will take all the information from the layers beneath it. I can get rid of dust spots and boom. Now, this window on the bottom left here was really bothering me. It's too black. It's distracting. So what I did through some Photoshop wizardry, and I can do this in another video, show you further how I did this, but I basically copied the mesh from this window on the right, and I brought it over into this window on the left, while retaining all of the woodwork around the window. Now, how did I keep the woodwork and all of this? I simply painted just the window in, and the rest of the image is not being shown. If you remember, white reveals, black conceals. So what are we doing here? We're revealing the mesh, and we are hiding everything else. Boom. Brand new window. Like it was never a dark black hole. Next, let me zoom out here. I did a little dodging on the building itself to kind of bring the viewer's eye to it. Now, the point in doing this is exactly that. I just want you guys to focus on the beautiful abandoned church. So I brighten it up a little on a dodge layer here. You may be wondering, what are all these wacky tools that I have over here? This is made by Tony Kuyper. It's called the TK9 panel. And it's this incredible tool for luminosity masking. For those of you not familiar with luminosity masking, it's this amazing thing where you can make masks of anything you can imagine based on the luminosity of the image. So we've got this here, and you've got these numbers, and you go left to right, right? You got these down here. So on the right hand side here are your highlights or your whites. You can see it in the background there. And these are your shadows. Now, as you go further down the number line, you get brighter and brighter, right? So if I click number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, these are the brightest parts of the image that would be selected. If I come here, it inverts it. Now we're dealing with the shadows. And if I go narrower, 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 even narrower, these are the darkest parts of the image. These three numbers down here, number 1, midtones, broader midtones, the broadest midtones. Crazy. Why I like this so much? It is creating masks that feather perfectly. Meaning when I go in and I make extreme changes, they're almost imperceptible. That is the goal of good editing in Photoshop. You want your changes to be controlled in a particular place, and you want to minimize people's ability to tell what you're doing at the end of the day. So I applied a Lights 1 mask. It's going to look just like the image itself. And then I was able to kind of burn out some spots that I didn't like. You can see this kind of splotch here. And just brighten up the center line there. And it's only affecting the light parts of the cathedral. That's the beauty of that. The other thing I did, I added a vignette here. Just kind of darken the corners, bring your attention into the center. Now, this vignette is special because, as you'll see, we've got the big black blob here in the middle. That is the focus point, right? And it's also blacking out the cross, the tree down here, the bottom down here, and a little bit of the sky. Now you might be wondering, how on earth is he doing that? Well, if I come through here, I gotta go back a step. Well, let's just say I create a vignette. I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna go to vignette, makes this for me, right? There it is. Let me make this super powerful so you can see what's going on. Beautiful vignette. Now, I don't want it to affect the darkest parts of my image. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this little guy, hit Layer Mask, then I'm going to go to this calculator, I'm going to go to Subtract, and I want to subtract out the dark parts that I don't want touched. So I'm going to come in here, maybe do a darks 4, hit equals. Now, my new vignette still draws you to the middle, but does not affect those dark areas. Crazy. So, that's exactly what I did. I'll delete this because it's already been done. Here it is. And then the last step for this image is applying some further sharpening to the center here. Now, if I turn this on and off, it's a very subtle change, but it kind of just sharpens up. Let's go down to the mesh here. It's more obvious. Look at this. Ooh, very cool. And then, boom. See that little pop there? So, that's it. That's the whole image. And I appreciate you tuning in to take a look at this deep dive on how I edited this cathedral. Now, this is one of the simpler images I've edited recently. The Other images on my profile range in levels of difficulty and extremeness of editing. This church was already so beautiful that I really didn't have to do much to bring that beauty out to the viewer. And so that is all that went into this. In the next video, I will take a deeper dive into another image of mine, and I will try to do a live edit of it so that you guys can follow along and hear my thought process as I'm going. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to my channel. I am open to any constructive feedback in the comments section about what you would like to see next. If you'd like me to cover different sections of this panel here, you don't entirely understand something that I did or why, please let me know. I'm happy to dive deeper into each one of these. When I do the live edit, you'll see me using these tools live, and that I think will give you a better idea of why I'm using the tools and how they could benefit your own work in the future. If you'd like to go ahead and do some research on your own, Tony Kuyper is the guy that made this panel. I'll put a link down to his website in the description below. Absolutely incredible. The amount of power it gives you within Photoshop to make fine adjustments to areas that you want to edit without creating just these jarring edits that really can be hard to look at, honestly. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I look forward to the next video. Have a good one.